Hi guys. I'm still in the Mediterranean, so lucky me. Oh, oops. I have two computers here I'm like looking at. How are you? I see Lauren, Jeff, Julie, Eden. Eden, what is that a picture of? What does that look like? Ribbons? I'll put my glasses on. Oh, I know what that is. Is that a carousel? That's what that is. She likes carousels.
Yeah, that's the lead horse on the Disneyland carousel.
Yeah, because I remember when you did the candy store in as your project.
Yeah.
Cereals. That was so cute. So fun.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, it's 7:25 already. Oh my gosh, you guys. Hold on. I gotta let people in. Last class time, I apparently did not see that Gabby was trying to get in. And she couldn't get in the whole time. I felt terrible. Hi, Madison.
Michelle,
Yeah.
you know you can change that in your settings, right? Where you set up it's in that, if you have to go into the Zoom account where you created the whole thing in the first place, and that's where it is. There's a button you click.
You know, it's so funny because last semester I know I had it and then I got rid of it and I don't know what it is. I keep trying to go in and figure out where it is and I just haven't done it. But I have to actually go to like account settings.
Yeah, to where you set up the Zooms. You can't do it. You can't do it from here. You have to go into your account where you create Zoom meetings and you do it in there.
It's so weird, like, because I have obviously my Zoom is through City College and it was totally fine last semester. And then I don't know if it renewed or something happened, but it's like a whole new thing. It's
right.
Really weird. Okay, I've been signed out. And then if you guys have it handy, um look at your timeline. It's just kind of nice to go over that. I actually went really fast last week and we kind of blew through ancient Greece and well, Egypt, Rome, and Greece. So we're kind of like a week ahead, which is really great. So I just want to kind of look over the timeline and look at things. And again, I will remind you, I'm not a historian, so that's why I like this timeline because it really gives you like a good sort of contemporaneous look at what everything that's going on throughout the whole world. While we wait and see if other people join us. Thanks. I'm sorry I had to switch the days. We were in Mammoth and I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to teach because their internet is so like weird and spotty there. Although my kids did school, so that worked out. But I just didn't know what to expect. Anyway, I'm looking at the timeline and I am going into kind of we're coming out of ancient Rome. So basically 1,000 years of, you know, the Roman Empire gone, right? We blew through that. And really the biggest thing that we're going to take away from that is skinnier columns, more technology in terms of structure, cement, what else? Barrel vaults, which we'll talk about. And there's going to be a lot of stuff tonight that we go over. And what I want to emphasize are certain things. And if I mention it, it's important. If I'm in, if I kind of go over it a couple more times, and it's probably pretty important. But I think that you'll figure out as we go through these lectures, it's like the architectural aspects are really interesting and important because so much of them gets transferred to the interiors and to the furniture. And sometimes furniture even looks like a miniature, like exterior of like a cathedral, for example, we'll see tonight. Um, we get a lot of that kind of transfer. So that's why we talk about the architecture, and plus the architecture is just a really important part of it, interior design and exterior design. I'm looking at 500 BCE, Julius Caesar is assassinated. Um, and then we start basically 410, Rome is sacked, the Roman Empire is done. And part of that we'll talk about is problems with way too decentralized and difficult, keeping everybody sort of quote unquote in line. Oh, Gabby's here. Gabby, I saw you this time.
Thanks.
Oh, I felt terrible. Anyway, so what we're doing is I just wanted people to get their timeline from their book out. I like it to kind of go over it a little bit. One of the important things I'm looking for, this print is really small. 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupts, which I think we talked, we did. We talked about that last time, but then we'll come back to that because they don't know about that until later. Let's see. Rome is sacked in 410. And we're starting today in the Romanesque style and sort of in the Crusades. So the Crusades, like 1096, 1204, and we're bringing, we basically go from, I'm going to share my screen right now because I think I'll come back. Hopefully I won't miss anybody. Basically, I feel like it takes like I said before, the Roman Empire was just too large to defend. And there were many, many invasions. And then once we move into the Middle Ages, I'm sure you've heard this before, referred to as the Dark Ages. So Dark Ages in so many different ways. Everything was about the church, basically. They controlled the direction of education. They controlled all the money. So texts and documents were basically hidden away, like just one big misinformation campaign. Really not very many people were able to be educated. You had to rely on the government and the church to give you the information that they felt that you needed. And people were left literally in the dark about history. And I'll give you one really interesting example. Remember when we were studying the caves of Lascaux, where they had those beautiful cave drawings made of pigment on the ceilings, and those had a lot of really great movement and perspective. We basically, as a civilization, lost the ability to draw in perspective. We forgot how to do it because there were no examples. We weren't allowed to see them. The church kept the text. Basically, religious figures were the people that were allowed to stay educated because they had all the texts and they squirreled them away and kind of hogged them. Um, and basically, the churches were the center of your life, your social life, your religious life, and you had to give them a lot of your money. So they led the style of the period, and which made a lot of really interesting architecture and religious based religion based. So Christianity became the accepted religion. We basically go from polytheism, um, worshiping, many gods, to Roman Catholic within 100 years. And it really did affect architecture and design. And so Christian churches replaced Roman temples. They basically recycled these Roman temples into Christian churches. Oh, there's Krista. Hi, Krista. We're starting the Middle Ages. We just started. So what I was just saying was Christian churches replaced Roman temples. So we're kind of pushing into Romanesque style. And then motifs emerged that all have sort of like a religious, slightly political meaning as we move forward. And so this is, let me find I have notes on these. This is a Romanesque church. I believe it's from 450 or 490. One second. Oh, no, it's from the 600. So this is a Romanesque and made of stone. And like I was saying, they would just recycle the structures and make them into Christian churches. And we notice the use of a little bit of use of the pillars. And we have a rotunda, which we'll see later. We'll see again. So don't forget that. And then we start to see arches. We start to see like a baby pointed arch here. And then we see a barrel arch here, and then we see the windows that are arched. And like I said, the community, it's the center of the community. Most important building, a lot of times built on a hill so that you could see it closer to heaven. And it was just the popular style of architecture. And then here we're gonna look at a lot of different vaulting styles. So these are just really big, chunky barrel vaults made of stone bricks. So this is a Spanish temple / church, and important Middle Ages structure in the Middle Ages. And then, so this is a smooth, rounded vault, and it's called a barrel. And I want you to know these vaults. And the technology was there to reinforce the stone with concrete. So as they move into Christianity, they're able to start building, because they have the ability to support their structures. They start building taller and taller and taller and taller on the inside of these cathedrals / churches. And then here's some really interesting imagery. So, and we'll look at the parts of the cathedrals. So one of the parts of the cathedrals was the tympanum right here. And a lot of times they, sort of depicted a story, that might be happening, like a Bible story or a creation story. So here's some close-ups. And then I want you to look at this hallway and look at these vaults. So these are called groin vaults. They come into a point in the center. So we've got these like barrel shapes, and then we go into groin vaults all along an arcade here. And then you notice we see a little bit of it's kind of it's a pillar, it's a column, but it's kind of a pilaster. So these are, pilasters are not full columns, they're like flattened columns against the wall. And then these right here, the tops, the capitals of the columns are historiated, meaning they have a story here. So right here is an example, a really good, here, I'm going to put your pictures up here. This is a really nice example of like a historiated capital. So you've got some leaves, either we've got oak leaves or we've got acanthus leaves, and then we've got, some sort of story. This looks like some religious figure, some, person of faith holding a Bible, possibly, showing this downtrodden person the ways of Jesus. It's just a lot of really interesting imagery and symbology. And I feel like it's really interesting given what we've been talking about with the sculptures and defacing the sculptures and what kind of messaging this is giving people, especially if you're, illiterate. And, this is all messages of, dark and kind of spooky stuff going on here. This looks like hell, like a depiction of hell. This I find super interesting. This guy here is clearly has murdered this fella right here. This looks like an historiated capital as well. And then we've got more religious imagery. This looks like serpents and also looks like a little bit of hell imagery here. So a lot of storytelling within the architecture. So we're taking sculpture and we're putting it inside. So it's art, but it's part of the architecture. Oops, okay. Here's a really interesting, very early Christian Romanesque type of church. Here we've really got the height, you notice here, but it's somewhat plain, but it does have some really interesting use of color, and it's also panels depicting, religious art. And then we've got like a wooden ceiling up high, and we've got the barrel arches, and we've got sort of a hierarchy of arches with the pillars here. But this is, this is a pretty, in comparison, pretty humble, but yet you still have the engineering, and you can get pretty high up there. This is a French, this is a French abbey. And I really like it because, I really like this one because I love the height. I love showing all the towers. And I really like this sketch because it shows the plan and it shows how similar it is to Romanesque in terms of all of the columns being used, how large it is, how it's shaped like a cross. I really like, the symmetry and the grandeur. And you even see out here, which we'll talk about later, the ability to hold up the structure with what is called buttresses. And this might be hard to figure out exactly what a buttress looks like, but we have better diagrams coming up. But I think this is a great looking elevation sketch because it gives you a little bit of perspective, but it also shows you exactly what these little pieces are, which are the buttresses that extend out and project out into space. And it's also part of what is holding up. Because what happened is they started building these cathedrals higher and higher and higher, and then they started caving in from the outside. So then they built these exterior buttresses and it held it up, but it was also decorative. So this is another example of some really great engineering, really, really tall, gorgeous vaults. So engineering, really amazing. And then the hierarchy of the arches and these beautiful columns. I mean, you even see, if you look over here, you're even seeing like a relief. So it's like they're stacking theme and motif on top of theme and motif. And you've got sort of a relief sculpture over here of an arch with columns here. Then you've got the window with the barrel vaulted window, and you've got this beautiful leaded glass. Then here in this area on this, on the side, you've got what's called a ribbed vault, but it's not as tall as this ribbed vault. And then you've got this other hierarchy where you've got like a little gallery up here, probably for, overflow or musicians or something. And you've got the columns and the arches here too. So it's all just sort of playing together, but very complicated and beautiful. Let's see what else. Oh, we'll go over this, but this down at the end is the rose window. And then I think that's it for that. So we're engineering taller. We have vaulted ceilings. The decoration disguises all of the structure. And we've got the fluted columns. So these little reeded sort of texture are called fluting. And then we see the capitals. And those are pretty plain looking capitals. And then we already talked about the arches. And then, so really, really important are the motifs, because when you start to look at furniture and really be thinking about, okay, how can I identify, what period this furniture is from, or most likely it's a revival, Gothic revival, because there really isn't a lot of actual furniture from the Middle Ages that survives. It's most likely going to be a Gothic revival, which is huge in the Victorian era. So the motifs will kind of follow a couple of different themes. They can be political, they can be religious, they can be natural or nature inspired. I'm just going to go over the most like popular, most often seen ones. They're used in architecture, they're used in furniture, they're used in decorative objects, they're used in textiles, and they use a lot of vivid colors, they use a lot of gilding. As you go higher in terms of who's using it, the nobility. Hold on one second. Okay. So some of these I am certain you've seen, and if you haven't seen it, you're going to start to see it everywhere. So this motif with the three, almost like a clover, like a 3-leaf clover, are the trefoil. And let me see, the trefoil is the Holy Trinity, so the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then tracery, which you're going to see a lot. So tracery, it can change a lot, and it's basically decorative. It doesn't have a theme because it always can be a different shape. It's basically carved sort of stonework, concrete work, and it is it's very delicate, but it kind of brings to mind, I think, thorns. It doesn't always seem like entirely gentle or soft. It has like a little bit of like an edge to it. Like it looks thorny to me. Hold on, sorry. But it's very beautiful. Sometimes you see it in jewelry and now, but you see it on Gothic all the time. And it almost looks like it's dripping, or it's got some thorns to it. And then strap work is very like complicated, interlaced, like a band or a design that is it repeats. I think it's very soothing to draw. It's um, it's just a very like cool, like repeating geometric pattern. And that does not strap work nor tracery really has any kind of like political or sort of meaning to it. Let's see, the quatrefoil. Oh, yeah. So the quatrefoil indicates the four evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then the rose without thorns um, indicates the Virgin Mary. And you see here that we've got a rose window with tracery, right? Made of tracery with quatrefoils, right? And then in here, we've got some stonework with rosettes, sort of bordering, and then quatrefoil. And then we've got tracery here, and we've got like a pointed arch. The pointed arch is really very common. And then the fleur-de-lis, which is an emblem of faith and used by the monarchy, also denotes faith, used by the English, but also like started with the French. So it kind of combines, those two. So it's used by both countries. So this is a motif. It's called the oak and acorn. I think sometimes this is hard to see because it's kind of small and like delicate. This is a good photo. Oh, here's Krista. And it's like many nature motifs, it symbolizes life, rebirth, growth, fertility, and immortality. And then I think the crockets are really, really interesting. So the crocket, it's sort of an interesting, it's sort of like a warning in a way. So it's placed, on top of the cathedral, right? Um, and it's almost like indicates like the hilt of the sword, sort of like a defensive symbol. So these guys, so they're sort of like a decorative, but sometimes they can have like a face on them. But a lot of times they look almost like a little dab of like frosting on a cake or something like that. They're just, little decorative little pieces, but they are supposed to be like the hilt of a sword. So when you hold the sword, it's like right there by your hand. And then the finial, this is kind of pixelated, sorry about that. So the finial is like the very top of, like a grouping of crockets. And then you might have like a gargoyle, and a gargoyle, would be like a symbol just to ward off like evil spirits.
Is that crocket from Spain? Is that what's the church? I've been there. Sagrada Familia.
Oh, you know what? I don't know exactly where this photo comes from, actually.
I think it is.
Is it? Okay, where?
It's in Barcelona. It's called the Sagrada Familia. It's a really
Yes,
famous.
you're right, because they're still working on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've been for I don't even know how long, but yeah.
We should I should have you guys look that up. Yeah, they've been working on that since
He was alive, which was I don't even know how long ago.
I'll send a link to that. I know it's really interesting. And then, so one of the motifs is the linen fold carving. I think this is really interesting because Some people couldn't afford actual textiles, so they would have someone carve something that looked like textiles, and then now you would think, wouldn't the textile be less expensive than having somebody carve it? But apparently not. Just really interesting. Okay, so the vaults that we're going to be looking at repeatedly. So we already looked at, the barrel vaulting, right? It's just the smooth barrel vaulting that is the more simple Romanesque vaulting. So then we saw the groin vaulting, which is just like a simple sort of a four points coming together. And then the rib vault, which, let me see if we can get back to that. So those are the rib vaults, just sort of like a more decorative groin vault. And then even more complicated is what's called a fan vault. So if you look at this is obviously taken from the floor looking up. And then if you look at the column here, so it's, rather thin, more like a pilaster. So thin kind of column with the capital, and then it just fans out and it connects to all the other ones. I think it's really pretty. So the actual Gothic style is we have those pointed arches, can't miss them, with the rose windows and the insane height that they're able to get, the use of buttresses for stability. And we talked about the tracery, the stained glass, the religious motifs. I think this is a really good diagram showing all the parts, of a Gothic cathedral. And it's like a cake. So this is what we looked at when we first started looking at those sort of religious stories in the tympanum right here. And then I think it's really interesting. Many cathedrals have what's called the jamb here. And it's very like interesting with the perspective. A lot of times they put a lot of symbols in there and relief carvings and just really give you a lot of information in there with carvings and historiograms. And we looked at the crockets, and we looked at the finials. And then there's the tower and the rose window. And then here's some more floor plans of a Gothic cathedral. And you notice that we have the transept kind of crosses the T and makes the cross. And then here is a more like specific diagram of those buttresses and how decorative they actually are, but they're holding up the side of the building. And then we have the hierarchy of all of the arches and the windows and the structure. So this is St. George at Windsor Castle. And this is where Meghan and Harry got married, actually, at this cathedral. It's not that large, actually. And so something really interesting about this is there's a college, and a lot of the students created, these interesting sort of more modernistic gargoyles that guard the top of the cathedral. I think that's pretty cool. And in here they have, those beautiful windows, and then also those fan vaults, and all this like interesting like woodwork that ends up looking like almost like a smaller version, of a cathedral because of its themes and its sort of the pointed arches and sort of the sort of pared down Gothic style within that woodwork and even the furniture. And then we notice in the windows, we notice the tracery and the arches, and we notice they're even using buttresses that are, a little bit smaller, but are still providing some structure from that upper balcony to the really high ceiling here. So now, when we think about the Middle Ages, one of the things that people had to be concerned about was protection, because there was a lot of people invading. The government was fairly decentralized, and so you needed a place to be protected, and you might live near, a feudal lord, and possession of the land basically depended on your ability to defend all of these people. So they started building castles. I think these are so this is Dover Castle. And the architecture, I think, is really, really interesting. There's not a ton of like motifs necessarily that blend into furniture, except, maybe a few things like maybe the crenellations that are at the top of the castle, which I'll point out. Some of the like high ceilings, large fireplaces are really interesting. But I think it's really interesting how people lived in these communities. So the nobility, lived in the finest quarters, but then also everyone just sort of like would be in the Great Hall, just, sleeping, eating, it's just everyone was sort of there. If you were a farmer, you had, a farm on the land, and you paid that lord in order to live there. And so I'm not going to require that you know all of these in terms of all the parts of sorry, all the parts of the castle. But I will point out a couple like really kind of interesting hold on one second. Okay. So here's a really early castle, 1067, built by William the First, made of stone. A lot of times they were built on a mound. And then the keep is where the noble family would live. And then the bailey was sort of like the open yard, and an inner bailey and an outer bailey, which is basically just a yard. And then the crenellated stone design, which is basically all these notches that you see. So maybe you've heard of this before, but you could stand, behind one of those notches or peek through a notch and maybe shoot somebody with your bow and arrow, or, like some sort of weapon. And so there was a lot of parts of the castle. I think it's pretty interesting. So there's these things called murder holes. So if somebody came close to the castle, there are these areas that were holes that if somebody was walking underneath, you could drop like some sort of, weapon or hot oil or something that was, deadly through the murder hole. Then they had these, places called, kill zones, There were dungeons. There were specific dungeons that were single person dungeons that were underground. Nobody could get out, and they were like a a grate in the floor. Um, let's see. There's obviously places like stables and storehouses for grain or food. Um, and so, from storybooks and from any, education you normally get, like you, there's a surrounded, protected by, a body of water called a moat. And then, you would lower the drawbridge would be lowered for you, and then you could come into the fortified area. Um, Sometimes there would be sort of spikes on the outside of the drawbridge or of the wall, um, so that animals, maybe in India was elephants, but in Europe it might be horses or oxes. And if you tried to break down the door, you would first get impaled by these horrible spikes. So that would prevent armies from coming in that way. Just super gross, lots of really interesting and creative ways to keep people and armies and things like that away. Um, but what there would always be is a place for the nobility, and then a place for all of their servants, all of their sort of entourage, basically. And that would be the most popular area to be, would be the Great Hall. So we've seen these either in maybe you visited them, but these, it was sort of like a place for the community of the castle to be. So you could sleep here, you could eat here, you could be entertained here. There up here would be like a gallery where people would be performing music, or then there would be a large fire. In the early castles, there might be a large fire on the floor, on the stone floor, with a window open to keep everything warm. But then as time went on, they created fireplaces, but you still needed super, super high ceilings, and design wise, they kept them because it just looked really nice. These are bracketed ceilings made of wood. Sometimes can be really, really fancy. These are called modillions. And sometimes they have, decorative aspects of, Gothic pointed arches or tracery or things like that, like this sketch is indicated. And notice how the tables are set, right? The tables are not in the middle of the room. You have like a head table, for the lord and lady and, the other, high status people of the castle. And then you would have along the perimeter of the room set long tables with, probably fancy textiles, but the design of the textile would only be on the side where most people would be viewing it from. And then the people who were eating there would only be sitting on one side. They wouldn't be sitting on the inside. They would be looking at each other. And this would be where in the center people would circulate. There was a lot of suspicion, during these times. There was, invaders, there was assassinations, there were poisoning, very exciting. And so you didn't want anybody walking behind you unless they were, serving you or anything like that, because there was a lot of risk. So it's interesting to me how the furniture had to take that into account. And the decorative side was the front, not the back. So I'll show you these tables, these trestle tables, where the decoration is on the front side. And then again, like I said, with the textiles, the decorated side would be the front side. And then we'll talk about the benches too. But so let's think about these great halls. So you'd even sleep there. So it wasn't, super grand. eating, socializing, sleeping, entertainment. This is a really interesting room. See this, the large fireplace. Here's an example of once, fireplaces were, placed in a room and you created a chimney. So you didn't need to have, all the smoke and everything. Can you imagine? And then this is, the stone bricks of different sizes, really, really beautiful with, some sort of like bracketing structure, barrel vaulting. And notice here, you even see, the slight columnar architectural aspect to this interior design. You certainly don't need to have them, looking like this, but it's like bringing that look into a design, move here. So then very large chandeliers. These were obviously wouldn't have been electric, but they would be very large candles, and they would be pulled down with a pulley system and lit so that you could see. And then castles are drafty. The only source of heat is the fire, and so tapestries were not only used to convey the mighty exploits of the Lord or his army, but also to keep the drafts out, and to show wealth, right? And so if you couldn't afford tapestries, and you always put tapestries on the wall, you would never cover the floor. There's no reason to cover the floor. You would just get it all dirty. They may have used, they sometimes use mats, but never anything at that point, decorative like a tapestry. A tapestry went on the wall. And it provided, a function. It was an insulation. And, one of the things you think about in terms of your own interior design and working with clients is that these things can be beautiful, can be functional as well. And these could be made of many different things: woven wool, linen. This is the Bayeux tapestry, and this is wool embroidered onto linen, and it's 230 feet long by 20 inches high. So just imagine this just very long, like scroll type textile, and it details the entire Battle of Hastings, which 230 feet long is pretty impressive. I was going to tell you a little bit about that. So the Duke of Normandy. So it was September, the Battle of Hastings, September 28th, 1066. Pevensey, which is a community on the south coast of England, huddled inside the ruins of a Roman fortification. And then William, Duke of Normandy, and a huge army came, and they came across the English Channel on hundreds of open longships. So here's that Roman fortification, and then here they are fighting. And these longships were big enough to carry cavalry horses and all the supplies needed to lay siege to those coastal cities guarding England. So, I mean, we're going to be doing final projects. So, and as we go through a lot of these slides, I'm just going to talk about things that I would love, if people want to get, more deep into. I would love people to think about textiles. This textile, it could be, or it could be like a study of different textiles. I would also love, since we don't really get to talk about it very much, to maybe study the Minoan culture. So just some thoughts there. So those people that were maybe lucky enough to have like a social status that allowed them to be, that perhaps they were merchants, so they, sold things. They were allowed to have, they had the ability to have larger homes, two-story homes made of wood and stone, and then the inside would be like whitewashed stucco, but then their furniture would be, super, super simple. Um, a chest to carry all of their, really precious items, maybe some clothing, um, if jewelry, if they had it, some precious pottery, and then a cupboard where they might keep linens or dishes or things like that, and then super simple, tables and benches. And a lot of times those pieces of furniture would be, moved to the walls, over the walls, so that if they needed to lay beds out, they could lay, like a straw mat out. So the store would be on the first level, and then their living quarters would be up above. And then if you were a farmer and you might live in like a really simple thatched cottage, like just a one-room dwelling, um, with stucco made of wood. And then this right here, this little shelf was basically a cup board, just a place where you could put your dishes, your cups, and that was, the first kind of cupboard. And then you'd have a fire in the middle of the floor where you would cook your food. And then maybe you would have stools to sit on that were easily moved, but not much more than that. All your money went to the Lord. And then now we're going to start to talk a little bit about furniture. So a lot of the furniture, even the furniture that was, used by the nobility, was still pretty simple. So, but you would have, if it was used by the nobility, it would have more, decoration to it. So um, this is the Annunciation, the painting, but I like it because it has a lot of really great motifs in here. So we've got the wooden ceiling. We've got these brackets that become very common, structural brackets. And then we see the tracery with a little bit of, Crockett imagery there. And so she is sitting, not really sitting in the piece of furniture, but she's sitting on a bench, which is called a settle. But this is a pretty fancy settle. It has some pillows and, some like beautiful draped fabric. She's, clearly higher status. And then notice how even this piece of furniture has architectural details, like the tracery here, almost like a window sort of design here, and then more tracery on the back of it too. It almost kind of gives it like a little bit of a wicker look or metalwork look. And then the table has, it's sided. It definitely has, it's not perfectly oval. And then it's got decorative, like a decorative trestle or some kind of, pedestal under here. And then the floor, the floor is, painted. Doesn't have a rug on it, but it's definitely painted. And then, very large fireplace here. And then, so then a simpler piece would be the three-legged stool. Even this though isn't as simple as the ones that we've seen. Even this is using, dowels to put it together, to insert it into the main legs. And then it's using stretchers here. These horizontal pieces are called stretchers. And then for the structure, and this one at least has a little bit of a back to make it, just a tiny bit more comfortable. So you could easily grab this by the back and carry it around, carry it from house to house. So all the furniture is, multifunctional, adaptable, easy to carry. There isn't that mindset where you only have certain furniture in a certain room. So there's no dining room, there's no parlor, there's no bedroom. It all goes everywhere. And then later we'll start to see, like, this room only gets this furniture, this room only gets this furniture, but we're not really there yet. And this is just a simple bench used for, really good for meal times, multiple people, can be easily moved, super inexpensive to make. We, we could sit on a bench like this at any time now. You'd probably have to spend like $1,000 to get one at, Restoration Hardware or something like that, or Pottery Barn, one that looked that chunky and cool. This, this is kind of post and lintel style, it's about as simple as it comes in terms of structure. I apologize, this is a terrible picture, but this is actually, a settle, which is, it's not a bench, but it's a settle, and it has like somewhat of arms, and it's got a back to it, so it's a teeny bit more comfortable. And that's what, let me go back. That's what Mary is sitting near. This is called a settle. It's a bench with arms, which is, a piece of furniture you could have in your breakfast room easily right now. This is a really great looking armchair. So obviously, this is from a noble person's home. This could be in a castle, for the lady and the lord to sit in. And you'll notice that there's some furniture tacks in here, so it must have had, maybe it was silk or linen tacked into there, as a seat. And then it has arms, obviously, making it much more comfortable. And this looks like, possibly like a battle scene, glorifying, his conquests. And you notice that this is, some strap work here along the edge. And then you really see, the structure, like the mortise and the tenon. And then here's some more sort of entwined vines, kind of. It's sort of like a combination of strap work and entwined vines. And then here, looks to be like, really worn from like the oils of the hand, but it's like some sort of animal, and kind of creating that thronos, Roman or Greek seat there. Let me see if I can see anything else. Kind of an architectural sort of like arch or vault here. That's from 1200. And this piece of furniture, not so much like you're going to move it around. You're gonna probably keep this, in that same room. And this is an example of a formal armchair for somebody who, really has a life of leisure. She's probably writing a letter, or, doing some needlepoint on this little easel chair / desk. with, architectonic sort of moves here where it has part of an arched, architectural, like almost like a pointed arch window there, but as a chair. Here's an example of the trestle table that would have been used in the Great Hall. And I was telling you how one side would be decorated, and here's like a little bit more of a close-up. So if you think about the Gothic cathedral, and you think about this is like the rose for the rose window. These are the pointed arch windows. We've got, 4 of them next to each other. And it's sort of like using the motifs and kind of squeezing them all in together. And then here's an example of the linens and how the linens would be, decorated on one side, and how they're basically, these people sitting are pushed up against the wall so that nobody can really surprise them from behind and, slit their throats or throw poison into their wine. But then these would be easily taken apart. The tops could come off and everything could be moved to the side to, make way for a dance or, some other kind of activity that was going to happen in the space. This is another piece of furniture that also has a ton of architectural aspects to it. It has that hierarchy, with the tracery and almost like the window aspect, and the columnar sort of motifs happening. And you would basically keep your linens or utensils, and it's, something that somebody very wealthy would obviously own. Made of wood. This is a great piece too. So obviously, as we talked about, like the pieces, the chests, you would keep all of your, most precious possessions, and it's somewhat easy, to move it around. And this too has all of that architectural aspects, the columns, the pointed arches, all that super complex tracery. Clearly this was some sort of like coat of arms for the family, and then, a specific like locking system. So it's a really cool looking piece. So this is an armoire, which armoires, I can't remember if we talked about this, would hold your armor. But then once you didn't need armor, the design, of the armoire still held. And it was large, so you could put your things in it, and you could lock the cabinet. And it evolved to basically hanging clothes storage, which is what we still use it for today. And you notice that it has like the iron strap work. And, this is evocative, this motif, evocative of the fleur-de-lis, right? Let's try to see if there's, any others. This is like hammered iron. And then it's like sliding locks. And then you notice here this architectonic sort of move here with the barrel vault. So everything was inspired by that really bold, architecture. Even this tiny little ambry. So this would have been like a cute little cupboard where you would have put your Bible or books that you had. And this would just be either sitting on the floor, like maybe in a little recess on the wall. But even this, has the little cute little motifs where it's got that iron strap work, but it doesn't want to be plain. It needs to be like either, a trefoil, or, you know, a little rosette there. And then we've got these like little, you know, teeny cute little windows with the arches. And then we've got the rosette down here, and we've got like a little pointed arch here too. So it's just miniature little architectonic piece. Somewhat easy to carry if you had to get away in a hurry, I guess. Beds, most people didn't have them. Most people just had a mat that you lay on the floor. Sometimes you would have like a piece of fabric stuffed with straw that you would lay on the floor. But, you know, the very wealthy would have a bed, which was almost like a little structure that had fabric around it because it was freezing cold, and it was, you know, better to have fabric around you, like curtains, to give you privacy. Easily the most expensive thing in a household, and, you know, only very wealthy people would have them, and not easy to carry, not anything that was moved, you know, but super ornate, especially, you know, the more wealthy. And we can look at these. So these are, you know, these are carved posters, pillars. And if you look over here, remember when we were in Greece and we learned about the caryatids, which were the women that were the columnar structural. So we've got that here. And we've got a little bit of Greek key here. And it looks like there's also some you know, use of like painting or color, something over here. It almost looks like fruit or something like that. I don't know if I'm seeing that right. But again, you know, very like architectural. This is, you know, this is the frieze, you know, this is the, you know, columnar. This is like almost like a window, things like that. And then here you've got leaf, and it looks like something, you know, crops or something growing. And here you've got vines and leaves patterns here. Here it looks like you've got rosettes and things like that. So these are the things, like, you know, you can start to look at these and just identify motifs. And I think like identifying motifs is really gets you close to what you're looking at and what period it's from, or what, you know, revival. Anyway, this was, you know, obviously a bed that you could attach curtains, you know, on the inside and then on this side as well. Oh, I think I'm done. Let me see. I am. Yeah, so I'm done with that. I'm gonna click out of that. And I'm gonna look at items that you guys, I'm gonna look at Canvas. Hold on, I have to find it. So many windows open. Okay. Ah. Oh, sorry. Okay. So it's February 11th. And so we kind of blew through Greece and Rome, but I think what will really help is having you guys work on that worksheet for Egypt, Greek, and Rome, which is due next week. Well, it's due Tuesday. But as I said, we don't have to adhere to due dates. I just want you to get it done as the semester goes on. I'd love you to read these Vitruvius excerpts, and we can have next week, we can have a discussion about those. I think those are really, really interesting if you've never read Vitruvius. And then I really am loving everybody reading The Myth of Whiteness in Classical Sculpture and the Iconoclasm, Erasing History, and talking about damaging sculptures, and everybody putting their thoughts in there's a couple like discussion questions in the discussion that I want people to think about and talk through, and I'm really liking that. A couple of you actually who are here have contributed to that, and that's really, really interesting. And I think it really makes looking at the historiated columns, is really interesting, and thinking about the Middle Ages and the lack of information, the lack of education, and the general, illiteracy of everybody, looking at those historiated, either the tympanum or the historiated anything, the tapestry of Bayeux, just seeing those stories created, I think is another really interesting thing to think about in terms of, erasing history, and think of all the things that have been erased that we'll never see. So I really like people contributing to that. I will turn on all of these things. So I'll get rid of this. I'll update everything. I've already started like updating everything. I'll probably just, I'll make this make sense. Obviously, we've gone ahead, a little bit ahead. So I'll turn on the quiz, the Egypt, Greek, and Rome quiz. You guys just keep working on your worksheet for Egypt, Greek, Rome. And then I'm going to have you I'll put this assignment in the proper week. I'm going to have you do a Gothic cathedral and motifs sketch study. I'm really liking looking at everybody's sketches. Is everybody okay with doing that, or do you hate it?
No, it's fine. I have a question about the Egyptian, Greek, and Rome worksheet. Do you want us to just kind of just like type it up and then like scan it? Just because some of it's sketching and then there's like a question that you actually have to like answer out.
Yeah,
And then it goes back to sketching.
I think, let's see, how did I have people do it before? I think a lot of people answered the questions in their sketchbook. So you could choose,
Okay.
you could choose to do that. Or if you want to just number the questions and type up those and then just say like see sketch, here, and then just add your sketches in, kind of whatever
Yeah.
makes sense to you. I don't really, as long as you like put it through Canvas, I don't mind at all how you do it. So it's kind of up to you. It's a good question though. But yeah, I'm loving seeing all the sketches. And so yeah, so basically I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to turn everything on so you can see it. And then, if you I think what I'll do is I'll have the Egypt, Greek, and Rome. Like if if you can try to have that done sometime like next week. I'm just giving you like guidelines. And then do the Gothic cathedral would just be the week after that. So I might adjust those for you. But I'll turn everything on tonight when I put the video up. And then I'll just have an announcement that, everything's all fixed. I think that was pretty much it. Do you have any questions? No? Okay. Well, I guess work on your worksheets and your sketches, and I'll get busy putting everything up and turning on the quiz. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
See you later.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.